If you were to ask me who in history deserves a 3-hour Forrest Gump-style epic made about their life, the crew of the Hojun-maru would be pretty high on my list. In October 1832, the cargo ship Hojun-maru set sail from Nagoya, Japan on a routine journey to the capital Edo. As the crew of 14 sailed up the coast, a sudden storm hit their boat, destroying its mast and rendering it unsteerable. Caught in the North Pacific's strong Kuroshio current, the ship was pulled out to sea. Being a cargo ship, the crew had plenty of rice to eat and could occasionally catch a passing fish or bird, but without any fruit and no sign of land, many would develop scurvy. After 14 months adrift at sea, only 3 of the original crew remained: Iwakichi in his late 20s and teenagers Kyukichi and Otokichi. As the 3 faced what must have felt like the end, by some miracle they reached land. The Hojun-maru reached the northwest coast of the Olympic Peninsula in January of 1834. The local Macau people fed the crew and brought them back to health, but took them captive, effectively making them slaves for the remainder of the winter. Word made its way through the local trade networks that a group of East Asians had been taken captive nearby. 300 kilometers south, the British chief factor for the Hudson's Bay Company at Fort Vancouver, a man named Dr. John McLaughlin, commissioned a search party to make contact with the Macau and pay for the release of the captives. It took 2 tries to get all 3 of the sailors, but by the summer of 1834, all 3 had been brought to Fort Vancouver. There, the local schoolmaster and church assistant, Cyrus Shepherd, taught the sailors English, and they were able to communicate their story to the officials at the fort. With Japan completely closed off to outside travel and trade at the time, Dr. McLaughlin realized the value of the 3 Japanese sailors at the fort and suggested using them as a bargaining chip to try to establish a connection back to the government in Edo. The 3 boarded a Hudson's Bay Company ship in November 1834 and headed first to Hawaii, then all the way around Cape Horn in South America and north through the Atlantic to London to be presented to the British government as potential diplomats or translators on behalf of Britain once they had become acquainted with the wonders of British culture and goods. However, London was uninterested in the endeavor and was annoyed that it had now paid to have 3 sailors taken all the way from the Pacific Northwest to England when they could have just been left in Hawaii. After a week of back and forth, when Iwakichi, Kyukichi, and Otokichi were only able to leave their ship once to see the sights of London, an agreement was reached to have the 3 sent to the Portuguese colony of Macau, where they would meet with German missionary Karl Gutzlaff with temporary financial support from the British consul and trade commissioner in Macau. The 3 reached Macau probably sometime in 1835 and helped Gutzlaff on translating parts of the Bible into Japanese. By total happenstance, another group of 4 Japanese castaways arrived in Macau from the Philippines, along with American Charles W. King, also keen on reopening trade with Japan. The now 7 displaced Japanese boarded the Morrison with King in July 1837 to finally head to Japan. Unfortunately, not knowing who was on board, Japanese forces fired on the Morrison at 2 different ports, although they did manage to get 2 castaways back home at last, unclear whether they were from the Hojun-maru or the Philippines group. Now at least able to make a living as a professional translator, though, one of the 3 sailors from the Hojun-maru, Otokichi, made his life in Shanghai, marrying a British woman, becoming a British citizen, and changing his name to John Matthew Ottoson. Through his work, he continued to travel the world, making it as far as New York at one point. It wasn't until 1849, 17 years after he had left home as a teenager, that he was finally able to return to Japan, helping translate during a surveying expedition. He returned again for longer in 1854, and this time was offered a chance at moving back permanently to his home country. But he turned it down. His new life was elsewhere. Otokichi eventually remarried and had 4 children, dying in January 1867 at the age of 49, having circled the world, visited at least 5 continents, survived months at sea, worked as a slave, been used as a diplomatic bargaining chip, found freedom and employment in his adopted homes, fallen in love, and raised a family. Here's to him and all the rest of the crew of the Hojun-maru.